It's a cold May night in Newport, South Wales. Behind the curtains of a small, weather-beaten flat, a mother's terrified screams echo down the empty street, but no one comes. On the other end of the phone, her daughter hears every second of it. The shouting, the crashing, and her mother's final, trembling words, "Ring the police." But Jordan doesn't. Not this time. Because this wasn't the first time she'd heard her mother cry for help. It was just the first time she didn't realize it would be the last. When police finally entered that home 2 days later, they found 44-year-old Kelly Pitt, a loving mother, grandmother, and friend, beaten beyond recognition, her body hidden beneath a blood-soaked duvet. The man responsible wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a burglar or a jealous ex. He was her own son, Louis Bush, a man so violent, so unrelenting, that even bail conditions couldn't keep him away. This is not just another murder story. This is a story of betrayal, of endless second chances, and of a mother's unconditional love turned into her own destruction. Because sometimes, evil doesn't come from outside the home. Sometimes, it grows up right under your roof. This is the horrifying case of Louis Bush, the son from hell. And trust me, this true crime story will leave you speechless. The story of Kelly Pitt begins quietly, in the heart of Newport, South Wales, where the rows of council flats line the streets like bricks of forgotten lives. Among them, at Sandalwood Court, lived a woman whose kindness was her greatest strength. And, in the end, her fatal weakness. Kelly was 44 years old, a mother of 3, a grandmother, and the kind of woman who always had time for everyone. Her family remembers her as funny, bubbly, and endlessly caring. She loved her garden, butterflies, decorating her home, and visiting the cemetery to see her late daughter, Lauren, who had passed away years earlier. Losing Lauren shattered her. But even through that pain, Kelly tried to keep her little family together. She'd smile through the exhaustion. She'd hide the bruises with makeup, because the man who hurt her most was her own son. Louis Bush was 27 years old. 2 neighbors, he was just another young man drifting in and out of trouble. But inside that flat, he was a bully, controlling, violent, and cruel. Court records later revealed a pattern stretching back years: battery, criminal damage, domestic assaults. In 2012, he punched his mother in the face and chest. In 2013, he kicked her to the ground. And just weeks before her death, Kelly was seen with a black eye and broken ribs. Each time, she forgave him. Each time, she believed he would change. But he never did. Louis Bush didn't see his mother as someone to protect. He saw her as someone to control. Even her daughters, Jordan and her sister, had lived in fear of him. It was the kind of fear that becomes routine, the kind that turns family life into survival. By early 2023, Kelly had finally reported her son again. She told police he'd attacked her, headbutted her, kicked her, screamed at her for money. Louis was charged and placed on bail, ordered to stay away from her and her home at Sandalwood Court. For a while, Kelly thought it was over. But bail conditions are only words on paper. Neighbors said they still saw Louis lurking around. They heard the shouting, the banging on the windows. He wasn't supposed to be there, but he came anyway. And Kelly, out of habit or hope, kept letting him back in. She couldn't stop loving her son, even when that love was killing her. In the first week of May 2023, Louis began showing up more frequently. The neighbors noticed arguments, voices echoing down the walkway late into the night. Then, on May 10th, things spiraled. Kelly messaged her daughter Jordan through WhatsApp. The texts were panicked, desperate. "He's starting on me for money," she wrote. "He's banging on the window." Louis was outside, trying to climb in through her bedroom window, shouting for her to let him in. CCTV would later show him in the area that night, pacing, yelling, calling out, "Oi, Mum, let me in." Inside that flat, Kelly was alone, frail, frightened, and out of options. When she finally answered his calls, Jordan could hear the chaos unfolding in the background. Kelly's voice was trembling, panicked, and Louis's voice was furious, aggressive. The argument started over money, and then, something as small as food. He was shouting that she hadn't made him a sausage and bacon sandwich. It was senseless, a confrontation that would turn deadly in minutes. Jordan tried to stay calm. She'd been through this before. She told her mother to lock the door, to stay away from him. But Kelly's voice was filled with terror. Then came the words that would haunt her daughter forever. "Ring the police." Jordan hesitated, because this wasn't the first time her mother had called in fear. It was just the first time. She didn't realize it would be the last. That call ended, and Kelly Pitt was never heard from again. Somewhere in those next few hours, Lewis Bush launched into a frenzied, brutal assault. The details, later revealed in court, were beyond comprehension. Kelly suffered 41 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, torn liver and spleen, massive internal bleeding, and multiple blows to her head and face. It wasn't a quick death. It was a sustained beating, punches, kicks, stamps, possibly even strikes with objects like a mirror or glass. The post-mortem revealed clumps of her hair and broken glass near her body. She had no chance to fight back. When the violence finally stopped, the silence that followed was deafening. Lewis didn't call for help. He didn't check if she was alive. He started cleaning. When investigators arrived days later, they found a blood-stained mop and bucket. The washing machine was full of clothes soaked in blood. He had tried to clean it all, to make it look like nothing had happened. Then he dressed her body, covering the worst of the blood. There was little spatter on her pajama trousers, a detail that suggested he'd changed her clothes after killing her. After that, Lewis walked away. He went about his life as if nothing had happened. For 2 days, he lied to his sister, pretending their mother was fine, just rough as F. Asterisk, 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 he said. On May 12th, he was caught on CCTV withdrawing cash from an ATM and buying a bottle of Stella Artois from a local Sainsbury's. He even sent a message to Jordan later that morning, saying their mum was unconscious, that her neck was blue, and that she shouldn't come over. But something in those words felt off. By 11 a.m. that day, Jordan's partner, Kieran Saunders, couldn't take it anymore. He drove to Sandalwood Court to check on Kelly himself. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air was heavy, the kind of thick, metallic smell you never forget. He walked into the bedroom and froze. Kelly was lying in bed, under a duvet soaked through with blood. Her face and neck were purple and bruised beyond recognition. The mattress was drenched. Kieran screamed for help. "Call an ambulance," he shouted to a neighbor, but it was too late. Paramedics arrived and pronounced her dead at 11:34 a.m. What they saw was not a random act of violence. It was personal, brutal, prolonged. It was a mother's murder at the hands of her son. When police caught up with Lewis Bush, they found him outside a police station. When told his mother was dead, he played dumb, pretending to be shocked. "What? My mum is dead? Seriously? You're joking me?" But investigators weren't fooled. He was interviewed 9 times. Each time he refused to answer a single question. For months, he denied it, until, just 17 days before his trial, he finally pleaded guilty to murder. It spared his family a trial, but no amount of justice could undo what he'd done. In court, Judge Daniel Williams told him, "You battered your mother to death in her bedroom. Over the years, you bullied her and others in your family. It is you and you alone who should bear the guilt for what you did." From the public gallery, Kelly's loved ones shouted at him, words filled with grief and rage. "Murdering scumbag, you destroyed her life." Her daughter, Jordan, stood trembling as she read her victim's statement. She said her mother was the most special person in her life, and that now, her 5-month-old baby would grow up, never knowing her grandmother. Then she looked at her brother and said the words that cut through the courtroom like glass. "You're no brother of mine after what you've done to Mum." Her voice cracked. Because even though Lewis was behind bars, she would forever live with the memory of that night and the haunting guilt of not calling the police when her mother begged her to. On November 10, 2023, Lewis Bush was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 16 years before he could even be considered for release. 16 years for the death of a woman who gave him life. Her father, Adrian Pitt, said it best, "No sentence will ever be long enough." The story of Kelly Pitt is one of love turned lethal, of a mother who kept forgiving until there was nothing left to forgive. But what happened inside that small Newport flat wasn't just one family's tragedy. It was part of a much darker pattern, a chilling statistic hiding in plain sight. Because across the UK, more than 170 mothers have been killed by their sons in the last 15 years. And as investigators began piecing together the horror of Kelly's final moments, one haunting question began to surface. How many more mothers are living in fear of their own children right now? When detectives entered Kelly Pitt's flat, they were met with silence, the kind that lingers after chaos. The bedroom was a scene of destruction. Blood spattered the walls. Fragments of a broken mirror glittered on the carpet, mixed with strands of Kelly's blonde hair. It wasn't just a murder scene. It was the physical embodiment of years of violence that no one had truly stopped. Police officers who responded that morning described it as one of the most brutal domestic murders they had ever seen. Every inch of that room told a story of rage, fear, and heartbreak. The post-mortem results confirmed what everyone already suspected. Kelly's final moments were marked by unimaginable pain. The force of the blows, the number of fractures, the internal injuries all pointed to a prolonged and violent beating. This wasn't an impulsive act. It was an explosion of years of pent-up control and cruelty. The evidence trail was impossible to ignore. Blood on the mop, bloody clothes stuffed in the washing machine. Even the half-hearted attempt to clean the crime scene showed how aware Louis Bush was of what he had done. And yet, even after taking his mother's life, he tried to live as if nothing had happened. He went out, withdrew money, bought beer. He lied to his sister. He joked. He showed no remorse. Detectives quickly realized this wasn't just a murder. It was the culmination of a lifetime of abuse that no one had managed to stop in time. Kelly had reported him. She had tried to get help, but the system failed her again and again. Neighbors later told police that the mother and son's relationship had always been volatile. They often heard shouting through the thin walls of the flat, but even they didn't imagine it would end like this. To them, it was just another family argument, something to ignore. Now, everyone in Sandalwood Court wished they hadn't. As police pieced together the timeline, a pattern emerged, one of repeated warnings and ignored danger. Every bruised face, every emergency call, every complaint should have painted a picture of escalating violence. But to the outside world, it was always dismissed as another domestic dispute. The truth was much darker. Kelly's life had become a constant cycle of forgiveness and fear. She'd tell her children that Louis was getting better, that he was trying, that he didn't mean it. She wanted to believe the boy she raised could still be saved. But every time she opened that door for him, she was unknowingly inviting her killer back inside. For investigators, the motive was painfully clear: control. Louis Bush was used to having power over his mother. When she tried to stand up for herself, to say no, to refuse him money, it threatened that control. And on May 10th, that threat pushed him over the edge. During interviews, police confronted him with the evidence: CCTV footage, the forensic results, the messages he sent to his sister. He stayed silent, not a word. He refused to acknowledge any of it. Even when they told him his mother was dead, he pretended to be shocked, laughing, acting confused. It was as if he believed he could lie his way out of what he'd done. But deep down, everyone knew he wasn't shocked. He was just cornered. When his case went to court, the atmosphere was electric, heavy with grief and rage. The courtroom was packed with Kelly's family, friends, and neighbors who had watched the tragedy unfold from afar. Louis Bush sat emotionless in the dock, his head down, showing no remorse. As the prosecution read out the details of Kelly's injuries, gasps echoed through the room. Even hardened officers struggled to stay composed. 41 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, torn organs, a mother beaten to death over a sandwich, and a handful of cash. When the pathologist described the extent of her injuries, her family broke down in tears. Some shouted at him, others turned away, unable to listen. And when it came time for sentencing, Judge Daniel Williams' voice cut through the silence. "You battered your mother to death in her bedroom," he said. "You bullied her for years. You are solely responsible for the pain and terror she suffered before her death." The words hung in the air, but they did little to ease the heartbreak. Louis was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 16 years. 16 years before he can even be considered for release. 16 years for the destruction of an entire family. After the sentencing, Kelly's daughter Jordan read her statement, her voice trembling with emotion. She said her mother was her best friend, her rock, her everything. That she still hears her mother's voice in her dreams, begging her to call the police. That she wakes up every morning wishing she had. She said, "You're no brother of mine after what you've done to Mum." Her words broke the silence, raw, painful, final. She spoke about the guilt, the sleepless nights, the memories she can't escape. She said her little daughter would never get to meet the grandmother who would have adored her. And when she finished speaking, she sat down, shaking, while the man who caused it all stared blankly ahead. Her grandfather, Adrian Pitt, also spoke. He said he'd never forgive his grandson for what he'd done, that no parent should ever have to bury their child, let alone lose them at the hands of another child. He said the bail system had failed his daughter, that Lewis should never have been allowed near her, that someone, somewhere, should have stopped this before it happened. And he's right, because Kelly's death wasn't inevitable. It was preventable. In the weeks that followed, the case became part of a larger national conversation. Journalists began highlighting the disturbing rise of matricide, sons killing their mothers across the UK. According to the femicide census, more than 170 mothers have been murdered by their sons in the past 15 years. That's nearly 1 in 10 women killed by men in the country. Behind those numbers are stories like Kelly's, women who loved too deeply, forgave too easily, and paid the ultimate price. Each case is unique, but the pattern is hauntingly familiar. Sons with histories of abuse, mothers too loving to let go, and systems too slow to protect them. Detective Chief Inspector Virginia Davies, who led the investigation, called it one of the most disturbing cases of her career. She praised Kelly's family for their strength and urged anyone experiencing domestic abuse from a partner, a parent, or even a child to come forward before it's too late. She said, "Help is out there. Please, speak up. No one should suffer in silence." But silence was what defined Kelly's final years. The silence after each apology, the silence after every beating, the silence of a family walking on eggshells, too afraid to push him too far. And then, the silence after her death, the silence that hangs heavy over Sandalwood Court to this day. Neighbors say that every time they walk past her flat, they still think about her. Some leave flowers. Others just stop for a moment, whispering a quiet prayer. For Jordan, every phone notification, every unexpected call, brings back that night, her mother's screams, her desperate plea for help. She will carry that sound forever. Kelly's story is a painful reminder of the dark corners of domestic abuse, the ones people don't talk about, the ones that don't fit neatly into the narrative of partners and spouses, the ones that happen between mothers and sons, bound by blood but broken by violence. The tragedy of her death isn't just what happened in that flat, it's that it could have been stopped, a call answered sooner, a bail condition enforced, a warning taken seriously. Any of those things might have saved her, but they didn't. And so, her name joins a growing list, women who loved their sons, believed in their change, and were destroyed by that hope. In the end, the story of Kelly Pitt isn't just about murder, it's about love, twisted, unconditional, and fatal. It's about a system that protects paperwork more than people, and it's about a warning we can no longer ignore. Because somewhere, right now, another mother is making the same excuses, another woman is forgiving the same kind of violence, another door is being opened to someone who should never be let back in, and unless something changes, Kelly's story will repeat again and again. She was 44, she was kind, she was loved, she was a mother who didn't give up on her son, until he took everything from her. So the next time you hear shouting through the walls, the next time you think it's just another argument, remember this: it might not be an argument. It might be someone's last night alive. This was the story of Kelly Pitt, a mother who loved too much, and the son from hell who turned that love into tragedy. And now, her voice joins the countless others, silenced by the people they trusted most. Because sometimes, the monster doesn't come from outside the home. Sometimes, it's the one you raised yourself.